feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win.
Welcome to the post-show wrap-up of the Shrimp Tank. I'm Brad Berger, along with my esteemed co-host, Dan Whedon. Our guest today is Aaron Schmookler of the Yes Works. We just had an intriguing and fun conversation with Aaron. To listen to the entire podcast, be sure to visit us at seattle.shrimptankpodcast.com or subscribe to us on iTunes. If you are subscribed on iTunes, make sure you rate us because we're always interested in knowing how you are enjoying the show and things that we can do better. So with that, Aaron, we had a conversation, and I really thought that one of the elements that you brought to the table was really impressive, and our listeners would really like to hear about, and that was the relationship between management and leadership.
So there's a lot of debate about management and leadership these days. Some people say don't manage, lead. I say it's impossible to lead without managing. Management is a piece of leadership. Management, one way of looking at it is that management is a tiny myopic view of how to get us from here to there, and here to there maybe a micro, a tiny little millimeter. Leadership is a broader view, and it takes not only greater distances into account, but also a greater scope of how people relate, relationships, the things that motivate us. So management is what you do from moment to moment. Leadership is the perspective that you come to it from.
Well, Aaron, it's interesting because leaders evolve for a variety of different reasons. What is it? What is it that keeps managers or employees in any level from actually becoming great leaders?
Well, one way of looking at leadership is that leadership is the first step into the unknown. So what prevents any of us from taking the first step into the unknown? What prevents any of us from expressing the kind of sympathy, the kind of empathy that leaves us vulnerable? It's fear.
And what is it about fear? Because obviously people are overcoming that. Talk about how what you've seen with leaders, how do they get over that fear and still move on? Great.
Well, I think it has to do with looking at the purpose. If you can really be inspired by what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're aiming for, then fear just comes along for the ride. It's not that the leaders are any less afraid than those of us who don't lead. It's that leaders make that fear irrelevant. They make that fear a passenger, and they focus on purpose. They embrace the fear. I think of, I'm a trained theater director, and every single time I step into the rehearsal room for the first day of this particular production, I think I have no idea what I'm doing.
It sounds like our podcast.
Here we go.
It sounds a lot like our podcast.
Or the post-show wrap-up of the podcast. So our listeners are going to have to listen to the entire podcast to really get the perspective of the next question I'm going to ask you. But we talked a little bit about attributes and traits of leaders, and we talked specifically about Xander and what leadership trait Xander exhibited that you felt was his strongest trait. So could you share with us a little bit about that leadership trait?
I'm going to surprise you and give you a second leadership trait. If
Wow.
you want to know the first one, you really are going to have to listen to the whole podcast.
This guy's good.
The second leadership trait that Xander exhibits is true caring.
Well, great. We want to thank you very much for being on the show. I want to tell our listeners that this is just a sneak peek of what you can expect by listening to the entire podcast. And, of course, you can listen to the entire podcast by visiting seattle.shrimptankpodcast.com or by becoming a subscriber on iTunes. And, again, if you are a subscriber, make sure you rate us. We always want to know how we're doing, and your feedback is very important to our show.
And we would love for you to connect with Aaron and learn more about him. So, Aaron, how would they do that?
You can find my company, The Yes Works, at theyesworks.com. Big surprise. I'm Aaron Schmookler. I'm the only one of us on LinkedIn.
And you know what? We're going to be gone for about 3 weeks. Our next podcast is going to be on July 26th with Ralph Nilsson from eSource. So please join us then. Until that time, the hay is in the barn.
Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank.